And our invocation, we just gonna bow for a couple of minutes in the memories of our civil rights leader who fought so hard for our voting rights. And now they are trying to get rid of our voting rights, but we are going to continue to fight. So we're going to bow for a couple of minutes in the memory of John Robert Lewis. Amen. Amen. Do you all still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. On our agenda, we have greetings, and I don't know if Tamara is on, but I welcome everyone here tonight to our voter education meeting. And we know we're gonna have a good, we're gonna be entertained with some good information from our speaker this afternoon. So our topic is, if you see, it said 2021 election, what's on the back of the ballot? And we're gonna find out tonight what's on the back of the ballot and what we should be doing now. So Christine Dinsmo, who is a member of the NAACP Civil Engagement Committee, will introduce our speaker for tonight.
Okay, thank you. I'm very happy to introduce Ashley Dittis. A little background, there are two commissioners for Ulster County Board of Elections. One's Republican and one's Democrat. And Ashley is the Democratic commissioner of the Ulster County Board of Elections. And I can say without a doubt, knowing my own experience with her, that she's the expert on everything to do with elections, and that she's the go-to person for all organizations and committee members. And she tonight will be giving us an overview of certain things in terms of important dates, the ballot, what's on the ballot, turning over the ballot proposition. She is a wealth of information, and it's really terrific that we're having her here. So she will present initially an overview, and then it'll be followed by questions. So I just would like to welcome you, Ashley, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Maud. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I consider, when I talk to groups like this group and other groups that I've talked to, I really consider you to be like my ambassadors for voting and helping people make sure that they know all the right information, where they can go and get the information, and really just creating this civic engagement so that we can have a robust election cycle. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. I have a PowerPoint presentation. It's not very long, but it's going to go through all of the important rules and dates for registration. Then we'll talk about what's on the ballot. And then there's some extra community engagement topics that we've developed this year that I want to share with all of you. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay, so let me make this big. Hold on one second. All right, and then I'm going to start presenting it. So you should be able to see now nice and big the presentation. So I'm going to minimize everyone so I can talk and go through what I'm doing. But if you have any questions as I'm going, put them in the chat, and I'll also pause for questions after each section so that we can talk about anything that might be confusing or you are looking for more detail on. So let's get going. All right, so the first thing Obviously, this is going to talk about this year's elections. Our elections have changed a lot in the last couple of years. We got early voting in 2019. There's been expansions to help our voters in New York State protect their vote. Unlike other states where we're seeing the opposite thing happening, New York State is actually moving more forward and more progressive. And that very much is resultant from the 2019 changeover from having a Republican-led New York State Senate to having a Democratic-led New York State Senate, a whole wish list of election reforms that we've only been hoping for years and years, all started happening when we saw that shift. So it's been quite a whirlwind. And then we had a pandemic in the middle of it. So there's been a lot of things that have changed. And with change, the voters get very confused. So folks like myself, and now you, because you'll know all of the nuances, you can explain this to people and help our neighbors, help our community have more access to this process. There shouldn't be roadblocks, but sometimes there are, and we want to do our best to make sure that we tear those roadblocks down and make it as easy as possible for people to engage in this process. So the first thing I want to talk about is voter registration. For us, the people that run the elections, this is our fundamental process. We do voter registration year round, but when we get closer to election day, we have deadlines. So first, let's talk about how to get a registration form. In New York State, most of our voters will register by using a New York State voter registration form. It is a paper form that is completed and signed off with an original signature by the voter. We have a bunch of ways that people can get the registration form. They can call our office. Our office is located in Kingston. They can come to our office in Kingston. We are located at 284 Wall Street in Uptown Kingston. That's our location for the rest of this election. Next year, we'll be moving, so we're going to make that very well known and publicized. But for this election season, we're still in our location that we've been in for over 20 years, and that's 284 Wall Street. We're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We are a county department, so we're all working for the county. We maintain that schedule. We are a public-facing office, so we don't close for COVID. We don't close for anything except for the holidays that the county recognizes. With the exception of Election Day, we're obviously open. We do offer extended hours as we lead up to the Election Day, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and we post publicly on our website. But now until in the beginning of October, that's Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We also send the forms down to your local post offices, your libraries, your town, your village hall. I was just doing a presentation last week with the village of Ellenville, the Ellenville Library. They have all the forms, so does the post office, and it's very readily accessible. People can also, because we know a lot of people are on the computer a lot, we've become more of a digital society, especially during the pandemic. You can fill the form out, print it, sign it, and mail it in. Our forms are available in English as well as in Spanish. Now, this will be expanded upon in the next couple of years, but there is a way right now, currently, we've had it for a few years, to register to vote online. Right now, the only people that can register to vote online are folks that have a New York State Department of Motor Vehicles issued card. So either that's a driver's license, a learner's permit, or an ID card. Any of those forms of documentation will have that DMV number on it, and voters or prospective voters can use that number to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles website and register to vote using the online application. It's very simple. It's very quick. We have been doing this form of voter registration online for the last few years, and we track everything at the Board of Elections. We're very data driven, and we have seen through the years more and more people using this online voter registration tool to register to vote. It's great. We love it. It's super easy for us on the administrative end. And for the voter, it's the easiest way to do it. But you do need one of those cards. If you don't have one, you'll have to revert to the other method, which is getting us the form mailed to us or dropped off in person. When voters go to do this process, they will also need their zip code as well as their last 4 digits of their social security number. So those are just two things to keep in mind when voters go to register to vote online. This is also all on our website and described. I essentially lifted this language from our website where it's all listed for people to access all the time. Now, let's talk about the rules for voter registration. In order to register to vote in New York State, you, number one, have to be a United States citizen. That's a national rule. It's part of the Constitution. So you have to be a citizen to vote, either a born citizen or a naturalized citizen that goes through their citizenship. So we actually, every couple of months, they do a new citizen event. We always provide them the materials. The League of Women Voters goes and tables those events. And we get a lot of new citizens who register to vote after that ceremony. It's actually really nice. If you've never gone to one, I highly suggest going. They really reinforce why we do what we do as civically minded people. The second rule is to be at least 16 years old by the end of the calendar year. So back in 2019, after they passed early voting, the second bill they passed was dropping the voter registration age to 16. Doesn't mean that they can vote. They still have to wait to vote till they're 18. But people who are 16, 17, they can pre-register to vote, so they don't have to wait until they're 18 to fill out the paperwork. They can submit that and they can be put into our voter roll. The cool thing about that is that they can also then serve as an election inspector. So I've actually hired in the last couple of years 16, 17-year-olds who want to help in their community, help people vote. And it's really nice to see they're already part of the process before they can even vote themselves. The third rule is to live in your current address for at least 30 days before the next election. So that's an important distinction. We do have a lot of folks who move after that cutoff date. So we try to get them processed as soon as we know that they're moving into the area. We also deal with the college campus out in New Paltz. Those voters can register because they're there on the beginning of the semester in August. And our second homeowners are also able to register. They just choose to register at their second home location as opposed to where they have another homestead. So we actually have a lot of voters who have second homes. They choose to register here, or they live at SUNY New Paltz and they register to vote on campus. This next one is a new rule. So happy to see this get passed. This got passed this year. So we've been changing our rights that we give to voters who are formerly incarcerated. The pathway to this was that it used to be back when I started working for the board in 2010, I would work on felonies. So somebody would be convicted of a felony, we would remove them from the voter roll automatically through the Department of Corrections. We would take them off and then they would have to go through parole and probation, and then they could register to vote. So that can take a really long time. Some people are going through that process for months after they leave incarceration. Then they changed the rule through executive order when former Governor Cuomo was in office. He had a pardon list. So we would get the pardon list and those voters would not have to wait for parole or probation to register. They could register as long as they were on that list. This spring, the state legislature passed law and it was signed into law by the governor that allows for persons who are leaving incarceration to register to vote as soon as they leave that status. So as soon as they step foot and they're back in society and they're free, they can register to vote and they don't have to go through any pardon list. There's no issues. They can register the next day. So we've seen a lot of change in that. We're now one of, I think there's only, well, there's less than 10 states that do it this way. It's a small amount. And we have seen a lot of people come through and register. And it's actually something that a lot of people don't realize that they can do. So we have this on our website, but knowing that people are not always on our website, or they don't look to check, this is something that we really want to get out there so that people who leave incarceration know that they can vote again. I have talked to a lot of people who had felonies that were years ago, the 80s, the 90s. They still think that they can't register to vote because that's the way it is in other states. And I'm always happy to tell them that's not the way it is here in New York. You can register, you can vote again. This is not a one mistake for the rest of your life takes away your civil rights. This is something that we recognize in our state, and it's a state-based rule. So that's what we've done in New York State. So it's really important. I wanted to take a moment and talk about that. One last form is obviously, I mean, it should be obvious to people, but you can't be registered in 2 different locations. So you have to choose where you register to vote. That's always a choice that our second homeowners, our students make. They choose to register in Ulster County. All right, so our first big deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks. It's October 8th. This is the deadline for new voters. And when I say new, I mean are formerly incarcerated. They'll be new because their former record was purged when they were incarcerated for their felony conviction. So they would be new voters. Brand new voters who have never voted before. Your 18-year-olds, if they didn't pre-register, they didn't register yet, this is the deadline for them. Anyone who is moving in from out of state, this is also their deadline. If they're coming from another state, they were registered out in Connecticut or New Jersey, anywhere else in the country, coming into New York, they're a new voter and they have to get their form postmarked by the state. So this is a postmark date, meaning that the form, or if they do it online through DMV, it has to bear this date in order for us to apply it to the voter vote roll that we'll send out to the poll sites. Once it's postmarked on the 8th, we have to get it by October 14th in order to process it. So that's about a week, a little bit less than a week. Knowing how the mail has been lately, when you're out and about, bring registration forms with you. This is really important. If folks are going to mail it in, they need to mail it in knowing that it's going to take a few days for it to get to us. So it's really important. If they can't do the online version and they're going to mail it in, get that postmark in and try to get it in sooner than that, because it does take a few days to get it to us depending on where it's coming from. So there are other registration deadlines outside of the 8th of October. If you're changing your address, meaning you moved, and when I say moved, I mean anywhere within the state. So if you know someone who's registered in Westchester County and they're moving into Ulster County, or they have moved into Ulster County, their deadline is going to be October 13th. It's not the October 8th deadline, it's this 13th deadline. But the thing about this 13th deadline that is a little nuanced is that we have to get it by the 13th. It's not like the other deadline, which was a postmark deadline. This is a receipt deadline. So they kind of fall in line with each other. If you're changing your address, make sure that you get it to us by that date. If you don't, you're going to have to vote by affidavit at the poll site. And we try to avoid as many affidavits as possible because the inspectors can mess them up, or you can do them in the wrong poll site. And we don't want that to happen because your ballot might be in jeopardy of being valid. So change of address, October 13th is when we need to get it. If you know somebody who is recently discharged from the military or they're a new citizen, their deadline is 10 days after that. It's October 23rd. They have to come and register in person, both of those categories of voters, recently discharged from military and new citizens. They have to come into our office between the 13th and the 23rd, or the 8th and the 23rd, and see us and do that in our office. We'll be open on October 23rd. It's our first day of early voting, so we'll be there to help everybody voting early, as well as these special categories of voter registration. The last thing I'll talk about for registration on this slide is our enrollment party change deadline. So this is also relatively new. A couple of years, we've had a later deadline. Back in the day, back in the old days, you had to have your party enrollment change deadline in at the same date as that October registration cutoff date. So back in the day, that would have been October 8th, the same as voter registration. That has changed. And now if you want to change your party, you have until Valentine's Day of every year. It's very easy to remember, Valentine's Day. And that is the deadline to change your party enrollment. Now, between Valentine's Day and our primaries that happen in June, the voter enrollments are frozen and you can't change your party enrollment. That's because we're getting ready for a primary, and that's what the state has handed down. They don't want people changing their parties to just change it to vote in a primary. So they have now just this period between February 14th and the end of June where you can't change your enrollment. Outside of that window, so now at the end of June, all the way until February, people can change their party and it's an automatic change. It used to not be automatic. It used to have to wait until after the election. But now between that frozen period, enrollment changes are something that we process on a daily basis and they take effect right away. This is important because of our primary system in New York State. We have closed primaries, meaning that you have to be registered and enrolled in a party in order to participate in that party's primary if they have one in our June primary cycle. So that's just something to be mindful of as we get closer to next year. I'm sure there will be primaries next June. Governor's election is up, all kinds of state offices, new ballot, our new districts will be drawn. So that might change the political landscape for Congress, the state Senate, the state assembly. So when that happens, we see more primaries. So if people want to engage in that primary process, they will have to choose to enroll in the party that they think will be having a primary before this February 14th deadline. So I'll pause and see if anyone has any questions before I go on to the next.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
You said honorably discharged can register. What if they're dishonorably discharged? Are they not allowed to vote, or are they on probation, or I don't know, but the
So we don't see this a lot. Our county is not a big military county. We don't have a base or a big group of military voters. I have about 100 classified military voters that get absentee ballots. The election law does say honorably discharged. So if they are dishonorably discharged, then they would have to follow the same rules as the civilian voters, which is that October 8th deadline if they're new, the 13th if they're changing their address. And if they blow through both of those deadlines, then they can vote, but they're going to have to vote by the affidavit process at the poll site. That's the paper provisional ballot that voters cast at poll sites when they can't sign into a poll pad and get a ballot for the voting machine. We give them the option to vote by affidavit, or they can seek a court order from the judge that sits on election day and during early voting and come and talk to the judge and tell them what happened. They got discharged dishonorably. Maybe the judge would say that's fine. And then they have the authority to do that and allow that voter to vote. That goes for all of our voters that missed the deadline. When they miss the deadlines right now, until we change the registration rules, which will be on the ballot, I'll talk about that soon. These are the rules as they exist now and for this election cycle. Did that help?
I think so. It
Okay.
sounds very complicated if you're dishonorably discharged. Just
I
don't
know.
do it.
I know. Liz, I see, is your hand raised?
Yes,
Okay.
I have two questions. One, the party enrollment. If that person changes his party enrollment on February 14, 2022, then they can vote in the 2022 primaries.
Correct. They have to get that change in. They have to postmark that by the 14th. That's another postmark deadline. So anybody that wants to change their party because they know there's going to be a Democratic primary, for example,
Yes.
they have to get that
And-
form in by that deadline in order to vote in that June 22 primary.
And I have another question is about the 30 days before the election.
Yep.
Okay, they have to be a resident of Ulster County for 30 days.
Correct.
However, if they moved into Ulster County and file a change of address form.
Mhm.
And so my question is about the portability law. That so does that mean that if they don't file a change of address, does that mean they have to vote absentee in the other place where they were registered?
So what I recommend to voters that have changed where they live within that time frame is if they miss the October 13th deadline or they move after the October 13th deadline, we want to know where their new address is in Ulster County so that we can tell them to go to either early voting. For early voting, they can go to any of the 6 sites and do the affidavit ballot. But on election day, we will tell them exactly what poll site to go to cast that affidavit ballot. So that's the way that they'll vote. They'll vote using the affidavit ballot. And when we get those affidavit ballots back into our office after the election, we research all of them. So we'll look up the voter, we'll see that they were registered elsewhere in New York State. We will count that ballot and we will update their address to Ulster County. So it does get counted. That's the in-state transfer law that they also passed in 2019. That has saved countless affidavit ballots from being invalidated. It's been one major step in the right direction. There's still a lot of updates to the affidavits. You might have heard of wrong church, wrong pew. That's something that we're all talking about now in the election world, where we want to make it so that even if you go to the wrong poll site, as long as you're within the county, that will be okay. But we're not there yet for election day. So right now they should call us, tell us the new address, and we'll tell them exactly where to go to do that affidavit ballot so that it can be counted.
I have a question, Christine. I'll make it quick because I know we have time constraints. If in fact a felon leaves prison after the deadline to register, but before the election, is there a provision to be able to get them to register since they were incarcerated at the deadline?
Unfortunately, there's not until we get this new law passed where we bring the deadline up to the 10 days, or better yet, we pass the automatic voter registration, or I'm sorry, same day registration after we get through this constitutional amendment, then that will change, but they will be under the same obligation as anyone with that October 8th deadline.
So here's a quick follow-up. So if in fact they know that they're going to be paroled leave prison on October 15th, can they register while they're still in prison?
It won't ping against the Department of Corrections, but it's a legal question that I don't know the answer to, so I would have to find out.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Let me just check quick, and then I'm going to move on to the different ways to vote. All right, I think we're good. All right,
I have a question, Ashley.
go ahead. Yep.
What is a no excuse absentee voting?
So that is something that we're going to see on the backs of our ballots. So I'll cover that when we get to
Okay.
that section.
Okay,
But
okay.
that is something that we're being asked to adopt with the ballot propositions, which
okay,
hopefully happens, but I'll get there in just a couple minutes.
okay.
All right. So before I do that, let's talk about the different ways to vote in Ulster County. So the first one I'll talk about is early voting. We've had early voting since the general election of 2019. It is still 9 days of early voting. They haven't expanded it. They're talking about doing so. But for this election, there will be 9 days of early voting that starts October 23rd, and it goes for 9 days. ending on October 31st. So maybe some of you have voted early. I vote early because it's way easier for me to get it out of the way so I can work on the election side of things. It's very simple. The thing I want to reinforce is that it's just like voting on your election day, your regular traditional election day, except you have more freedom to go to any of our sites that we establish. I think a lot of people think that we put a site in New Paltz and it's only for people who live in New Paltz, or I put one in Kingston, it's only for people who live in Kingston. That's not the case. These are more like the larger early voting centers that you see in other states that have been doing early voting for a lot longer than us. We've adopted that same model. So instead of having very hyper localized poll sites, we have larger centers for the 9 days of early voting because it's spread out more and we can help more people. So we open these sites for all of our 126,000 voters to access during the 9 days. It's just like voting on election day. You sign in a poll pad, you get your ballot, it's printed for you on demand. It's your ballot for your town, your election district. After that, it's the same exact process. You mark your selections, you fill in the ballot, and then your ballot gets scanned by a voting machine. Once it's in a voting machine, it is counted. There's no challenging the votes. There's no trying to take the votes away. It is in there. It's going to be part of the results that we report on election night. So it's a very secure way of voting. It gives people peace of mind that their ballot's cast, it's counted. They don't have to worry about something happening between the day that they vote and election day. They're already in there. Like I said, we have 6 early voting sites in Ulster County for this election. The state only requires us to have 2 early voting sites, one in the city of Kingston, but we have always had more sites than they make us have because we recognize, and I've always pushed this narrative because it's true, that we are such a large geographical sized county. We have roughly the same land area as the state of Rhode Island. We have very rural locations. We also have urban locations, and we have locations that people frequent. I've always taken the spirit of early voting to place these sites in places where people would normally go to during the course of their regular days that they do every day. I know not everyone thinks about elections all the time like I do, and like you folks do more than the average person, but I've always thought that these should be on public transportation routes, that they should be in all of the villages that we have. And this has been something that I have taken my capacity as a commissioner and I've communicated that to our state legislators. And they're slowly starting to understand what the needs of upstate counties such as Ulster really need. Because I have to speak with a chairperson that is a Brooklyn-based state senator and sort of describe to him what it looks like in our neck of the woods and how it affects our voters. So it's been a lot of learning as we go, but I think we have been one of the better upstate counties, and that is reflected in our performance as an upstate county during early voting. So this year, we have these 6 early voting sites, and I'm super happy to finally have a general election early voting site in Saugerties. It's been something that has been on our list for quite some time. So there is a site up at the Saugerties Senior Center at the Cantine Field Complex. We are exploring doing more geographic outreach with our sites for this local election. So I have a site up in the Catskill, the gateway to the Catskills, the town of Olive. There's a site that's going to be at the American Legion. So that helps a lot of our rural townships that are up in the Catskill Park. Down in Ellenville, this has been one of our sites since we started early voting. We've always had a site at the Ellenville Public Library. This has been something I've been also an advocate for, knowing that Ellenville is one of our villages, as well as being one of our at-risk communities. We don't see as much engagement as other towns. I wanted to be able to give them another way of voting that is accessible both by public transportation as well as a walkable early voting site. So we love being at the Ellenville Library. They're very accommodating to us. It's a great site. I think we'll be there as long as we do early voting. The next one we have was also a big deal for us this year. SUNY New Paltz is going to be hosting an early voting location, which is not just a big deal for the students, obviously it is, but it's also a big deal for Ulster County since it is our biggest employer is the college. Believe it or not, more people work at that location than any other business, public or private enterprise in the whole county. Anyone that works at SUNY New Paltz can vote there if they're registered in Ulster County, as well as the surrounding areas. So I'm very excited about that site. One big question I get about the SUNY New Paltz site from people that live in New Paltz, like myself, I live right across the street from the college, is will there be parking? There will be parking. The college has committed to having dedicated spots for early voting. We meet with the college regularly. They are very excited to have us there. And I'm very hopeful that this will be also a site that we continue using in the next couple of years. Our fifth site is also new. That's the Marlborough Town Hall site. So that's more on the southern facing end on that side of the county. So that's really important to us. And we have a site in Kingston. It's required to be in the city of Kingston, a site. We have always had a site at the Midtown Neighborhood Center. It's a great site. I used to vote there when I lived in the city of Kingston. It's very large. It's a mega site. So we get a lot of activity at that site as well. So those are our 6 sites for this year. This is something that we approve every year. So this is something that I always have to go and negotiate with my counterpart and see where we want to put them. So this is where we've landed this year. Then on the right-hand side is our schedule for early voting. It begins the 23rd. It goes for 9 days until Halloween, our last day. On our weekends, we're open from 10 to 3, Monday through Friday. It's a mix of daytime and evening hours. So there's 9 to 5 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then on Tuesday and Thursday, we start at 12 noon and we end at 8 o'clock to give people time at night to go vote early. The hours will expand next year, but it's effective by January 1st piece of legislation. So we'll actually have more hours next year, not more days yet, but there will be more hours in next year's early voting calendar. The next way to vote is by absentee ballot. This is vote by mail. So this is our version so far, vote by mail. This is also going to be changing in the next few years, but let's talk about what it looks like right now. So right now, voters in New York State can have a ballot mailed to them, but they have to apply for it and they have to give a reason why they need it. So first, let's talk about how they can apply. Starting last year with the pandemic, there was action to create an online electronic application portal, and they did so very quickly. The State Board of Elections developed an online application, something that they always said was so difficult. They ended up producing in less than a month, and it works and it's amazing. And we on the county board side, all of us across the state, all 62 counties, we love it. It is tremendously easy to process applications that are requested this way. Voters don't make mistakes on the online application like they can filling out a paper form. And we get these online requests no less than 4 times a day. So every day, especially last year when hundreds of people were applying for absentee ballots every day, we would get a download from the State Board of Elections once in the morning, then the mid-morning, the afternoon, and then before we closed the office. So it was constantly transmitting these online requests to our office. They're a breeze to process. We got through every board across the state. We all have a little bit of PTSD because of how many absentee applications we got, but this made it a lot easier. And they've continued it through 2021. So it's online, it's active. And I encourage people, if they want to vote by absentee, to go online and fill that out, and we will get it as soon as you hit enter, we'll get it within an hour or two. Alternative to that is the old style. You can fill out an application and send it to our office in the mail or via email. This is also something they've expanded since last year. You used to not be able to email an application, but you can. That's our email address right there, elections@co.ulster.ny.us. This is all on our website, on our absentee page. We also have, again, our applications are in English, in Spanish, and we have a special absentee application that is for our handicapped population, and it's an accessible absentee application, which will then in turn send an accessible ballot to those voters so that they can mark their ballot in a variety of ways. It's a special program for that group of voters. Eligibility, like I said, and Maud, you alluded to this earlier, but right now voters do have to give a reason to vote by mail to get an absentee ballot. These are our 6 reasons, but I want to focus on reason number 3, which I bolded, because this is a continuation of a executive order from last year that they've turned into an election law this year, is that there's a temporary illness reason that voters can choose to get an absentee ballot. That temporary illness reason has been expanded to include the risk of contracting or spreading a communicable disease such as COVID-19. So we have on our end, we have on our form, our paper form, we have elaborated that reason to say on the application, including COVID-19, so our voters know that this is the COVID code. This is the reason to get an absentee if you're worried about getting COVID, or if you are just fearful of going to a public poll site where you might contract any illness, including COVID-19. So essentially, this reason has allowed for vote by mail for anybody who wants it, because you don't have to prove that you have COVID or that you've tested positive. It's just the fear of getting the risk of contracting COVID. So anyone can check this box, and it's a reason, it's a verified reason to get the ballot. This reason code will expire at the end of the year, but if the ballot referendum is passed, voters will no longer need to give a reason to vote by absentee. All of this will go away, and anyone who wants to vote by mail will be able to access it. The other reasons have been around forever. Since the Civil War, people can obtain an absentee ballot if they're away from their county on election day. If they can't appear at the polls due to a permanent disability. One great thing about this code is we have a lot of voters who check that they are permanently ill, our older voter population, people that have illnesses, they're homebound. Once you submit the form with this permanent absentee reason, you never have to fill out an application again. It carries with you through the year. So it's a one-time application if you are permanently ill, unlike the others where you have to fill it out every year. If you know somebody who is in this category, maybe they live in a nursing home, maybe they are housebound, this is a great option for those voters. And again, they only have to do it once, and it will send them a ballot for every election they're eligible for, primaries inclusive. So it's a great reason. We have about 3,000 voters who are permanent. They always get a ballot. We're sending ballots out in the mail this week, so they will all be getting their ballots this week. 2 other reasons they're not as used is the patient in a veteran's home, unable to appear at the polls because you're taking care of someone who is ill, and as well as detained in jail awaiting your grand jury action, or if you're in prison for an offense that is not a felony. So a misdemeanor in the county jail, they can vote by absentee. We would send it to the county jail and they would vote that way. We have special forms for our military and overseas voters. Military and voters who live overseas, they have a special form for mailing their ballot in. That's the military and overseas absentee ballot request. Those voters are special categories. This is a federal program, so this happens all across the country. Those voters can download and print their ballot from where they are in the world, and it saves time with the mail. This really saved a lot of voters last year when foreign mail really ground to a halt. They were able to at least download their ballot. They still have to print it and send back the original ballot in the mail, but it cut out weeks of getting them the ballot. So all we had to worry about was them getting it back to us. So it's a program that's been around for quite some time, since the late 2000s. And it's really great. If you know anyone who is in this classification, they can apply. As long as they give an email address, we can send them their ballot through a secure website, and they often will download and send it back. All right, so let's talk about the absentee deadline. This is something that is happening October 18th. This is an absentee deadline for people who want their ballot mailed back to them. So in order for us to process the mail and send a ballot back in the mail, we have to get that request no later than October 18th. Those are for folks that want us to mail them the ballot. That's the deadline for putting their request in. Now, if they miss that October 18th deadline, there's other options, and they can come to the office in person. They could send somebody with their application filled out and the name of the person who's coming to pick it up designated to pick up their ballot for them. And that can happen up until the day before the election. So November 1st is the last day for someone to get an absentee ballot for themselves or for someone else that has given permission to pick it up for them in person at the Board of Elections in our office in Kingston. On November 2nd is the last day for voters to postmark their voted ballot to come back in the mail to the Board of Elections for us to count it. And also, voters can drop off their voted ballots at any of our poll sites on election day and at any of our early voting locations, as long as it's within Ulster County and not another Board of Elections in another county. They can drop it off. It doesn't have to be their voting location. It could be any of them. It could be somebody else bringing it with them when they go to vote on behalf of the voter. As long as we get it on election day, it's gonna count. If you vote this way, what you can expect to get in the mail in your package is an envelope configuration. I like to call it the Russian nesting dolls of envelopes, because you'll get an envelope package. And inside of that package will be your ballot and 2 envelopes. You're going to vote your ballot just like you would on election day. It's also coloring in the bubble for who you want to vote for. Also, the ballot referendums are on the back side of the ballot, just like they are at the poll sites. Once the ballot is voted, the voter folds it up and they put it into an oath envelope. This is an envelope that has a signature box on the back, so the voter signs it off. It's like when they go to vote at the poll site, it's like their poll book record where they sign the poll book. Instead, they're signing this oath envelope. That gets sealed up with the ballot inside. The oath envelope gets sealed, and then it goes into the mailing envelope. And you can tell it's the mailing envelope because it has pre-printed on it the address for the Board of Elections to come back to us. It does require a stamp. It's a question I get a lot, but it does require a stamp. 1 stamp is fine. The mail will take it in, and we will get it postmarked by November 2nd, and we will count it 9 days after the election. That's when we start counting these absentee ballots. If a voter has asked for an absentee ballot and then they change their mind and they want to go and vote in person, they can. They go vote early. We see that they did so. We don't count the absentee ballot. They go on election day. We see that. We don't count the absentee ballot. That's still the case. It's going to change next year when we count absentee ballots before election day. But for this year, that's what you need to know. And it's okay to vote in person, even if you've requested or sent back an absentee ballot. And last but not least is election day voting, our traditional election day, November 2nd. It's where it lands this year. Voters will go to their assigned poll site that's connected to their registration. And if you don't know where that is or you want to check it, we have a poll site online tool where you can check your poll site and see where you're supposed to go vote. Our poll sites are open from 6 o'clock in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. People still vote this way. I think it's the last resort, but it'll always be there. All right, so before I talk about the ballot, let's see, do we have any questions about those styles of voting? Yeah, Liz?
This is a quick question.
Sure.
Do you see an increase in polling sites in the future other than 6?
For early voting?
Yeah.
Or for regular vote? So
No,
I
early
actually
vote.
feel that for early voting, we will see, first, we'll see more days of early voting.
Mhm.
Like other states, the state of Virginia is the extreme. They have early voting for 45 days
Oh,
before the election. They just started September 17th. You could go vote early in the state of Virginia. I have a lot of friends that live down there that work in DC. They've already voted. They're done. I think first we'll see an expansion of the days, and then we'll see an expansion of the sites. So this year they have expanded the site requirements, but it only went up to 4 for Ulster County. So I still have more than what they're mandating, but no less than 4 is now the new metric. I think the lines they saw last year flipped them out a little bit, as it did all of us. So hopefully they continue to make rules about expanding early voting, because I see a world where more people vote early than on election day. Actually, last year, election day, believe it or not, it was a presidential election. It felt like a local election because so many people had voted earlier, submitted an absentee ballot. So I think we'll see more of that as we go on. I actually also think that mail-in voting will become more utilized. I think a lot of people did it for the first time last year because of COVID. But since next year we'll be counting the ballots before Election Day, that will take away people's fear of their ballot being challenged. And I think that will encourage more people to vote through the mail and submit their ballot that way. And they'll also know that it was counted or it was counted and cast, because there will be, along with that counting, a new way of tracking your absentee, your mail-in ballot online that the state board is developing, that's going to be live by 2023.
Ashley, I'm jumping in for Madeline because I don't think she has sound. She put in the chat, if the ballot is not in the oath envelope, is it invalidated?
So we have what we call a cure process. This is also relatively new. We started the cures process last year. If we get a ballot and the voter has not put it in the oath envelope, we will let the voter know that they have done so, and we will go to extreme lengths to contact them in all of the different methods that we have on file for the voter, whether that's email, telephone, or fax. We will let the voter that they made a mistake, that it has to come back in the oath envelope, and we will facilitate them with a new ballot so that they can correct that issue. So that's part of the cure process, is letting the voters know that that is an issue, because it is one. It has to come into the oath envelope. Otherwise, we can't count that ballot. So they changed the language on our envelopes last year to make it more expressive to the voters on the different steps. And actually, we saw very few ballots that came back that had to go into the curable defect pile, which I was amazed. We had 20,000 more people vote this way than we normally do. And I only had, out of those 20,000 ballots, less than 20 that had to be cured. That's remarkable. That's essentially 0 ballots. And so we go through all of those steps to get a hold of the voter, and it's something that has also been legislated in the last few years. It's another one of their big steps to helping the voters with that kind of voting style.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Now we're getting to the nitty gritty that we've all
Yes,
been.
we are. Here we go.
With bated breath because we have time, and here it is. Great.
Ballot propositions. I know you've been waiting. All right, let's talk about what's on the ballot. So this is just an example. Our ballots always have two sides. The scanners that scan the ballots, both the absentee ballots, because we use a scanner for that, as well as for the early voting and the election day ballots. They're double-sided because our scanners read both sides of the ballot. One side of the ballot has all of the elected offices. We're used to seeing what that looks like. In Ellenville and also around the county, we have the following. These are county-wide offices. Everybody will have these on their ballot. There are 3 state Supreme Court judges. They are unopposed Democrats. Nobody else is running except for those 3 people. Ulster County Family Court Judge, also an unopposed Democrat. She is running with no opposition. Ulster County Clerk is Nina Pastupak. She's cross-endorsed by both the Democrats and the Republicans. So that is also an unopposed county-wide election. Ulster County Comptroller March Gallagher. She is also running unopposed on the Democratic line and Working Families line. Then we finally see some competition in our county legislative races. Not all of them. The Village of Ellenville has an uncontested county legislator. John Gavaris is running unopposed. Village of New Paltz, Eve Walter unopposed. Town of New Paltz, Megan Sperry unopposed. There's a bunch of unopposed county legislators. So some of the contests do have candidates who are running against one another, but don't be surprised if you just see one name. And then we get to our local races. That's either your town races or your city of Kingston. They have the alderman races this year. And generally speaking, that is a supervisor, could be a town clerk or a receiver of taxes, superintendent of highways, town justice. Sometimes there's one of those, sometimes there's 2. Council people, so 2 of those in every township. And then if you're in a village and your village has opted to have their elections in November, like the Village of Ellenville, you'll also have trustee positions that are on the ballot. So in Ellenville, these are all of the races that are up for elected office that we see on that side of the ballot. That's just an example. All of our sample ballots are on our website right now, so you can review your specific town's ballot and see what you have going on the candidate side. But don't be surprised if you see a lot of unopposed races. Now on the other side, the flip side of the ballot, we have our ballot referendums, which are a vote yes or a vote no. And there are on every ballot, no less than 6 ballot questions, 5 constitutional amendments, the New York State Constitution, and 1 Ulster County Charter referendum. So let me go through what each of the 6 of those are. So first, let's talk about the 5 state ballot propositions. So the first one is no excuse absentee voting. Maud, you mentioned this before.
Yes.
When I was talking before about the absentee application and those 6 reasons why people right now have to check one of those boxes in order to get a ballot, if this ballot referendum passes, that will get rid of that requirement where people have to give a reason. And instead, they can just ask for an absentee ballot and they will get one. It's more of a vote by mail method. So if you want to vote by mail, once this passes, you just tell us you do, and we will facilitate a ballot for you to come back in the mail or however you want to get it. You could pick it up, you could come and get it in our office. A lot of folks do that now. So that will get rid of the reason for getting a mail-in ballot. A lot of states have mail-in programs, most notably the states of Oregon and Washington. The Pacific Northwest has led the way in vote by mail. They almost exclusively have vote by mail, so they automatically send voters a ballot. This will not make it automatic for us to send ballots. You're still gonna have to ask for it, but it eliminates the reason. So if they're gonna do an automatic mail-in program, that's gonna be further legislated. But right now the Constitution requires a reason. So they're asking if voters want to get rid of that constitutional requirement, which I expect they will. I expect that this will pass. It's very popular. People enjoy voting by mail, despite what some political opposition has said about it. It is a safe method of voting. It is not fraudulent. We go to considerable lengths to make sure that our mail-in ballots are verifiable against the voter's signature. And it's very easy for voters to vote this way. It's a lot easier than having to schlep to a poll site or figure out which poll site to even go to. So I think a lot of people will engage in this process, especially once they eliminate the reason for asking for a mail-in ballot. So that's number one, no excuse absentee voting. Number two is a same-day registration pathway. So this will remove right now the 10-day advanced voter registration requirement, which has been deemed unconstitutional. And so we have to amend the New York State Constitution to remove a 10-day advanced registration requirement. So like I said before, our registration requirements are more than 10 days. Right now, October 8th for that registration deadline, the 13th for that mail-in deadline. If this passes, this will eliminate those rules. And then the state can pass laws to allow for same-day registration. So what does that mean? Same-day registration is when a voter can register on election day or during early voting at the poll site and be given a ballot to vote. How the mechanics of that will work varies in different states that do it. Luckily for New York, we're not creating anything that hasn't been tested in parts of this country already. So we're taking all the best practices that we see across the country, and we're going to apply it to this new method if this referendum is passed. We're already talking about how to do it. I'm part of a workshop with other commissioners around the state. There's like a core group of 15 of us, Democrats and Republicans, and we're talking about how best we can implement this so that it is workable for the administrative side and so that we can give our voters more time to register to vote. So I also think that this will pass. I'm pretty optimistic that actually all of these will pass. So that's the second one that is election specific. It's our same day registration ballot initiative. The third is, it's a little bit wonky when you start reading about exactly what they're doing, but this is about redistricting, which I know is a very hot topic in political circles. The term gerrymandering is something that I'm sure all of you are pretty used to hearing. New York State has already gone to some lengths to make an independent redistricting commission. We just saw some drafts come out of the independent commission that they put together years ago. This is going to fine tune that and make it more independent than it is. It's going to also change the census blocks and how we do that and make it more or make it less prohibitive. It's no secret that last year's census was very mishandled and that there's likely miscounting happening. I think New York State was very close to not losing a congressional district. I think it was like less than 1,000 people that they didn't count, and we lost a congressional district. Some of these rules address that issue. So it's very, the Democratic caucus in the state legislature, they're very positive about this. They keep trying to make the process more fair, more transparent, so people understand what's going on when we redraw these lines for these political subdivisions. And overall, it's positive, and I think it will pass. So I encourage you to read more about that. On our website, we have not just the language as you'll see it on the ballot, but we also have links to what they call the proposition abstracts, which will give the voter, it's a document that the state legislature prepares, and it lets you understand how they got to putting it on the ballot. So it can be a little technical. If you're having difficulty understanding it, let us know and we'll get you in touch with the right people. But it does give you more of an inside perspective into how they got to getting these propositions in front of you when you go to vote. So it can be very helpful. They'll also all be at the poll sites. We send those to all the poll sites as well as having them digitally on our website right now. Number 4 is the clean air, water, and healthful environment proposition. Now, I always tell people that this one sounds like a real fluffy, oh, isn't that nice? We want to give people the right to clean air, water, and a healthful environment. I cannot understate to you how legally speaking, this would be a major development in the realm of environmental advocacy and protections for ourselves as citizens, at least of our state. This would allow for easier access for litigation against polluters, whether that's companies like GE, famously Hudson River. I remember learning about that when I was in elementary school. We're still cleaning that up. So this would expand the ability for people to exert their right to having a clean environment. It's come a long way. This has been something that they've talked about for years. I know that there's big environmental groups that are championing this. I think it's a great thing personally, myself. So this will also be on the ballot. It sounds fluffy, but it actually has a lot of teeth, and it can really change the landscape for our ability to combat things that are really developing very quickly in the realm of climate change that in our lifetimes we'll definitely see. We're already seeing the effects of those things. So that will
Yes.
be on your ballot. Number 5 for the New York State referendums, it's probably the one that us in Ulster County personally least to care about or care the least about, and that's our New York City Civil Court threshold. We don't live in New York City. I don't expect any of you will have a litigation in the New York City Civil Court, but it is in the New York State Constitution, so it's in front of us all across the state on our ballots. So just briefly, this will bump up the dollar number for actions to come in front of New York City Civil Court. Right now, anything over $25,000 goes to Supreme Court, which is already pretty backlogged in New York City. So this is going to free up dockets in the New York City, not just civil court, but also in the Supreme Court. So all the lawyers that I talk to say this is a great thing. Again, it'll be on there for us to consider as New York State voters. Finally, there is the county proposition, and that is a county charter referendum. So that is speaking to funds designated for payroll expenses. So this would prohibit, for example, I'll give you an example that, you know, my county department, Board of Elections, we're a county department. This would not allow us from moving money from, let's say, my inspector pay to like a programmatic expense. So we all do our budgets, we submit our budgets, those get approved by the legislature, the county executive submits the budget. This would not allow for a change of payroll expenses to other expenses. It's only ever happened once where someone did this, and it was years ago, and it's a reflection on that. So this was back when they moved family court, and the county executive at the time moved money from a payroll account to put out information about the move of family court from the city to the town of Ulster. So this is a response to that, and it's for all of us to consider. I won't elaborate more on it. If you'd like to learn more about it, I suggest you reach out to your local legislators to get their take on it. It's a little bit of a wonky referendum, but because it is a county charter change, we all have to look at it and decide if we support it or don't support it. I don't really have too solid of a position on it. I just told you what it is, and if you want, you can dive more deeply with your local representatives. All right, so what is it?
Okay, Ashley. I have a question.
Sure.
And you know, I always come by the Board of Election to pick up a sample ballot. So how early can we pick up a sample ballot?
All right, so I've been so persistent with our vendor about these sample ballots. They just sent us this morning the electronic ones. I should be getting the physical. You like the paper copy, the nice
Yes.
one?
Yes.
I think I'll have them next week. but I'm gonna write down that you want them.
Yes,
So when I have them, I'm gonna send you an email and let you know they're there. But I just got the digital versions today. And we're gonna put those on our website. Right now on our website, we have the absentee versions. But the ones that I got today are a little easier to read. So as we get that information, we'll replace it. Also, I'm gonna have those nice big sample ballots. Knock on wood, we'll have them next week.
okay,
In time for them to go out and people can review them, look at them,
yes,
specifically the back side, the
right,
proposition side, because this is essentially what you will see. This is the bilingual ballot. So this is our ballot that is in English and in Spanish. So proposal 1 is our redistricting process changes. Proposal 2 is the right to clean air, land, and water. Proposal 3 is the eliminating the 10-day voter registration requirement. Proposal 4 is the no excuse absentee voting. Proposal 5 is the New York City Civil Court. And proposal 6 is the Ulster County Charter change. So this is the format that it will be across the board for all of our poll sites that only have these 6. I do have specific municipalities that have local referendums, smattering of those, mostly to do with library or bond resolutions. So if you live in any of those towns, New Paltz has 2 if you live in the village, 1 if you live in the town, Woodstock has 1, Olive has 1, Marlborough has 1. Trying to remember them all. They are all on our website for everyone to review the town propositions, but I'm focusing on these because this is what everybody will see across.
Ashley, may I jump in for a second?
Sure.
This is Christine again. I'm going to ask you an opinion on Proposition 1. Elise Stefanik is opposed to it, and Michelle Hinchy is supportive of it. Can I assume that that the Republican is opposed to it because the original situation leaned more to gerrymandering that was done when the Republicans had the majority, or am I taking a leap there?
You were not taking a leap. That is exactly why there is.
So they're trying to correct what was previously set up as a very gerrymandered political situation.
Yes, I don't know if anybody is as nerdy as I am, but I looked at the maps that came out last week. If you want to take a look at what gerrymandering looks like, you can look at the Republican congressional map, which has parts of Ulster County sharing a district that goes all the way up to the Canadian border. That's what they submitted. So there will be limitations to how they can gerrymander if this is to pass.
So if it passes, it limits the ability to gerrymander.
It
Yes.
does. It does.
Okay, thank you. I was
So
just curious.
that's addressed in the last sentence. So it talks about the appointment of the co-executive directors and amends the manner of drawing district lines for congressional and state legislative offices. I haven't seen what Elise Stefanik has put out, but I would have to imagine it takes umbrage with that last line about drawing district lines for congressional districts.
okay. Are there any more questions?
Liz, I see your hand.
Proposal number 6 about the Ulster County payroll.
Yes.
So you're saying that the payroll expenses will not expenditure will not be used for other expenditures.
Correct. So
Okay.
when we submit our budgets, we have our payroll budget. That includes people's salaries. That includes their health benefits, everything that has to do with your personnel. I have an additional line for personnel because I have about 650 part-time workers for the elections. That's also a personnel line in our budget, for example. Other departments have similar situations that use part-time work outside of their full-time work. This would not allow for any movement of money from those lines to other lines, whether they are programmatic in nature, which a majority of the rest of our budget at the Board of Elections, it's all programmatic. It would not allow any movement of payroll money into other forms of expenditures that, you know, as county departments, we have various expenditures, so you wouldn't be able to do that. Right now, if we wanted to do that, we would just ask the budget director for permission, and he would make a budget adjustment. The charter enables him to do so. So this would stop them from being able to do so. Again, in talking to people in the county and to our legislators, this only happened once, and it was during Mike Hines' tenure. Back when they moved family court, it was somewhat controversial because they moved it out of the county seat in Kingston over to the BRC, which I happen to be in the BRC right now. So family court is on the other side of the building that I'm in, and it's just over the city line. It's in the town of Ulster. So it was on the ballot for people to consider when we voted on it. I think that was back in 2017, I want to say. And so at the time, evidently they moved payroll money to pay for a mailer to voters to let voters know that the facts about this. And the certain legislators were upset by it. And this is a reaction to that happening. Now they want to enforce no one being able to do that, but they have to amend the charter to stop that kind of budget change. That's my understanding. Again, I didn't develop this language, but I have read about it. I've asked people about it because when I saw it, I didn't really know what the heck it was talking about. The abstract is a little hard to read.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it doesn't really say anything. So I inquired, and that's my understanding. But
Okay.
again, I didn't talk to all the legislators. I only talked to a couple of the Democrats, and that's what they referenced. So it makes sense to me where they're coming from, but I don't know. I haven't decided how I'm going to vote on this one. We'll see. I need to
Also,
do more homework.
I have one real quick question. Do I have to vote on that, the jurisdiction of New York City since it doesn't pertain to me?
No,
Pertain
you
to-
could skip it.
Oh, okay.
You could skip it if you want to. There's no requirement to vote for all or any of these if you are not compelled to. You could skip any contest. You could skip any proposition. I might
Okay.
skip it too, or I don't know, I might vote
Yeah,
for, I
it's
don't know
not-
yet. I don't know what I'm gonna do on that one because I don't know. We'll see. I have to find out more about that one. I've asked a few people. They seem to have positive feelings about it, but I don't really know. It doesn't really affect my life. So we'll see how that goes. That'll probably be skipped by a lot of people. I have to imagine of all of these, I'll probably get the most blanks on that one. I see. a
Emma has her
up.
hand up here.
Yeah.
Hello?
Are you muted?
Who was that, Ed?
I think-
Emma has had her hand up, the hand option on Zoom.
Oh,
I think she might be frozen. Oh. Are you back? Emma, I see a question in the chat. I think you might be asking or trying to ask that, but it says, where can we find more information for these amendments? Let me see if I can show you real quick what our website looks like, since I am sharing my screen. Hold on one second. So I don't know if everyone can see this, but if you go to our website, voteulster.com, right here, is our sample ballots and our propositions. Our theme this year is Turn It Over Ulster County. And these are the propositions in this format. So it's a document format. And the abstracts that I talked about, we have links to. So the first one, for example, the amending of the apportionment and redistricting process, if you click on this abstract link, it will take you to what the State Board of Elections has developed to expand and elaborate on where it came from, what it means, and what it does. So this is something that we have online now. It will be at all of our poll sites. We'll have this available for voters to review both in a paper format as well as we've created QR code stickers so people can access it on their phone and look at it while they're voting to just read through this. As you can see, it's quite long. This one is 19 pages, including their certification of it for ballot placement. It goes through all of these different mechanisms and what it will do. You can see when it's changing something, it has a strike through. So it would eliminate all of these. It's going to eliminate all of these elements that have strike throughs on it. That's what we're being asked to amend. And then where it's changed, the changed language is noted. You can see this is changed language right here. So this, it's not the most voter friendly or civilian friendly way of doing it, but this is the way that they give us the extra information. So it can be helpful. I've read through all of them a few times, so I understand it a bit better than when it first got the language and I just read the brief paragraph that will be on the ballot. So this is the kind of information that we get, that we have available. Again, we're sort of limited in how we can message things. Obviously, we can't advocate for or against something as the people running the election. But if you reach out to your state legislators, Michelle Hinchy, Kevin Cahill, Jonathan Jacobson, James Scoofus, their offices are more free to talk about why they support these things. They had to vote on them in order for them to get on the ballot. So if they voted yes or no, they can give you the reason why. And it can be very illuminating. So especially for the state propositions, our state legislators, they voted to put these in front of us. So they'll have more deep thoughts, maybe more thoughts that are less complicated than a full ballot abstract is. And it can be very helpful to talk to them. There was another question from Madeline. Is that on everyone's ballot to save money on printing? No. The printing of ballots is actually not that expensive. Just to let you know, it's on everyone's because these are state constitutional amendments. So even though we don't live in New York City, for example, it's changing our state constitution. So we have to fully look at it. That's why we all see it. We're saving money on ballot printing if you vote early because we print your ballot on demand. That saves us a lot of money. So another reason to vote early is it's saving us money in printing, but don't worry about the printing money. We've got the money for 5 cents a pop ballots. Any other questions? This was the side here. Let me get back to this. I just have a couple more slides to talk about, and then I can take more questions. Let me move some things around. Okay, so you're used to seeing this side of the ballot. This is our candidate side. Lots of candidates this year, lots of things to vote for. One thing of note is we have less parties this year than we did last year. That's the reason for that is now every even numbered year, these parties are up for ballot placements. So if they don't get individually for their governor or presidential candidate 130,000 votes statewide, they lose ballot placement. Now that seems like a lot, but there's a state of about 8 million voters. So last year, only 4 of the parties got that threshold, the biggest being the Democrats and Republicans, followed by actually Working Families Party did better than the Conservatives, but this placement was established in 2018 with that governor's election. And next year, when we go to vote for governor again, all of the parties will be essentially vying for keeping their ballot placement. So I'm not too worried about the Democrats and Republicans keeping their ballot placement, but the Working Families Party, they just made it with their 130,000. So they'll be, I'm sure, vying for people's votes so that they can maintain their ballot status. And I'm sure we'll see trying to come back the Green Party, the Independence Party. We used to have the Libertarian Party. They might try to come back, the Reform Party. So they're not on the ballot this year. They can try to come back next year, but they have to meet that threshold. And we'll see if they do. So that's something that we'll have every 2 years, the change of our parties and where they're placed on the ballot. So this is their placement this year. It's a anecdotally, they changed that last year, and it's a little controversial, but nevertheless, this is what we're dealing with. Just for everybody to know, this is our website, and there is so much on our website. I just showed you a little bit of it, but we have spent a considerable amount of time and resources in making our website as friendly and accessible to people as possible. We're constantly putting content on it for candidates, for voters, for I've got stuff up there for kids now. Like, we're really doing our best to make our website not a political place, but a civic engagement clearinghouse. So a lot can be found on the website. If you have any notes on our website, we're always open to suggestions. Let us know. Some people are very persistent in doing that. So it can be very helpful, and we're always trying to make it better for everybody. We have a chat feature on there now, so you can chat with us. We're always making improvements.
Maud had her hand up. Maud, are you wanting to kind of wrap us up here?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Ashley, the parties that's on the ballot this year is the Democrat, the Republicans, Working Family,
Conservative, and Working Families. So these are
Conservative,
our
and Working
4.
Family.
Yeah.
So it's only 4. It's only
Only
4,
4.
right? Okay. Okay. Are there any more questions for Ashley before we wrap up? Well, no more questions.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. Go ahead,
Sorry.
Emma.
I was wondering, so all of the, I asked if you could send us a PowerPoint, but if it's on the website, then is all of this on the website or something, or is the PowerPoint on the website?
Most of actually everything that I put together in this presentation came directly from our website, but I'm happy to share the presentation with everyone. I will send that along either tonight. I'm going to go and finish this inspector class, and then I'll send it tomorrow morning when I'm back in the office, because I got to go help the
Okay.
deputies.
Okay, but before you go, Ashley, we want to thank you for coming on and giving us such a wonderful presentation. And I wish more people was on to hear the presentation. So we thank you for doing this for us tonight.
It was my pleasure. It was fun.
Thank you.
I love doing this kind of stuff.
And I also like to announce that our next meeting, our next membership public meeting will be on Tuesday, October the 19th at 6 p.m. and it will be Meet the Candidate Night. So we need everyone that's on now to come back on to meet your candidate and have questions for your candidate.
I have one more question.
Will that be Zoom again? Will that be a Zoom meeting?
Yes, it will be on a Zoom meeting. As of now, NAACP cannot go. We got to stay on Zoom. It'll be on Zoom. Okay.
Thank you, Ashley. It was
I have
excellent.
another question. I'm sorry. I have
Go
another
ahead.
question. How do we help with the working the polls? Because I know like they need volunteers to sign up because like maybe I'm interested in doing that.
Yes,
Call me.
for
call-
sure.
Okay, okay.
Call the office. We will sign you up. We are
Yes.
still looking for people. We're teaching classes now. I'm at the BRC because this is where we're teaching the classes right on the other side of this wall. I can hear them. They're probably like, why is she banging on the wall right now? But we're teaching them how to use the poll pads, and we're doing classes all throughout September and October. So call the office or email me and we'll get you signed up because it's a really great thing to do.
Is that phone number on the website? I could just look.
Yep, it's right on the website. You can actually fill out an inspector survey on the website to let us know you want to do it.
Okay, we thank you, Ashley, for that
Thank
presentation.
you. I hope you all have a great night and I will hopefully see you all in person sooner than later.
Okay, and don't
Thank you.
forget to call me so I can pick up this sample.
I'm gonna call you.
I mean, email me.
Right.
whatever.
I'll get it to you. Don't
Okay.
worry. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
you.
everyone. Good
Everybody
night.
have a good night. Thank
too.
everybody for
Good
coming
night.
on.